Hi guys, it's me, Chazza HD, and welcome to yet another Grand Prix in 2025 as we have only 6 races to go in this Formula 1 season. And the championship absolutely on the driver's side is hotting up, especially after the sprint race we've had today, which finished about, hour and a half ago or a couple hours ago, something like that. The sprint race here in Austin, Texas. And yeah, it is really starting to look interesting now in terms of can Max Verstappen pull off what was deemed the impossible a couple months ago, which is win his 5th world championship. I'll get on to the results in a moment from the sprint race and what that means for the championship, but yeah, it really is looking interesting now going into these final few races. Of course, in the last Grand Prix, Max did gain a few points on Norris and Piastri. Not quite enough, though, for what he was wanting. But after the sprint race, things are looking pretty decent for Max Verstappen. But yeah, it was dramatic, the start of the sprint race. But yeah, we'll get onto that in a moment. And yeah, we are here for the United States Grand Prix in Austin, Texas, at the Circuit of the Americas. Usually, this is one of the best Grand Prix of a Formula One season. I think consistently it does deliver. So I'm hoping that this weekend will be no different. Obviously, qualifying, we've had some great battles here in the past for pole position and some big surprises as well. And as we know, the races here have been pretty good in the last few years and just in general since we started covering here in 2012. And I am very much looking forward to this weekend. It is a big weekend on the Drivers' Championship side. The Constructors' Championship, of course, is now decided. McLaren are the champions, but the Drivers' Championship, which is very much between Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris, and Max Verstappen, is getting even closer by the looks of it after the sprint race. And if you want to know what happened in the sprint, the only thing I've seen from the sprint is the results and a video clip of the start. And what happened at the start was Hulkenberg and Alonso got tangled up, and then Hulkenberg hit Piastri, and then Piastri hit Norris. And then, both Aston Martins and both McLarens DNF'd from the sprint. Max Verstappen took full advantage and won the sprint race. So Max Verstappen is now 55 points behind Piastri in the championship. And remember, we still have 6 more Grand Prix and 2 more sprint races to go in 2025. Those 2 sprint races being in Brazil and Qatar. So even though the odds are still against him, I think at this point it's absolutely doable that Max Verstappen could win his 5th world championship. He will have to win basically all of the remaining races and even probably the sprint races as well to have a chance, a proper chance. But we know with Max that he can go on a run and win loads of races in a row. Remember, he broke Sebastian Vettel's record for the most consecutive race wins back in 2023. Max ended up with, I think, was it 10 wins in a row? So we know he can do it. It's just dependent on whether the car is quick enough to do it in these final few races. So, yeah, it really is shaping up this final few races for the championship into possibly being a thrilling conclusion to what has been a not so great Formula One season, a season that I think promised a 3-way championship battle, but we didn't really get it until pretty much now. But yeah, that's how it is looking. And this qualifying session, which as you can see on your screen, hour and 25 minutes to go until qualifying begins at COTA. This qualifying session is a big one because any mistakes that leads to 2 or 3 lost positions on the grid, it really could be the difference in the end between winning and losing the Drivers' Championship. It's getting that close between Piastri, Norris, and Verstappen. And I cannot wait to get into this session this evening. Hope you guys are well, by the way. I know I haven't done any content on the channel since the last Grand Prix. I've been busy, obviously, with uni, which is going still decently well. Yeah, good to see you all. Hope you're all doing well. And I hope tonight you can all join me in watching along and enjoying qualifying here in Austin. If you can't watch the session, though, and you want to keep up to date with what's going on, this is the best place to be. We'll keep you absolutely bang up to date with everything going on in qualifying. And as usual, no matter what time zone you're in, what part of the world you're from, hope you're all having as best a time as possible, given whatever circumstances you may be going through. And yeah, good to see you all after a couple weeks away from streaming and doing content in general. And quickly, before we get into the build-up to qualifying, which will be the usual stuff, except instead of looking at practice, the practice data, we'll be looking at the data from sprint qualifying, which of course was yesterday, and set the grid for the sprint race. Before we get into that, make sure to vote in the poll that is running right now at the top of the live chat, where, as usual, I've asked you guys who will take pole position today in this qualifying session here in Texas. Will it be Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, or George Russell? Those are the four options. Let me know, out of those four options, who do you think takes pole position today? And in a couple hours from now, we'll finish up the results of the poll and we'll see who you guys have voted for. And we'll see, ultimately, of course, whether that driver does actually end up on pole. But yeah, things really hotting up now on the Drivers' Championship side, which I am very much excited about. And who knows how things could look in the Drivers' Championship coming out of this weekend. Anyway, let's get into the data from sprint qualifying, which gives us a good base for where teams are at so far this weekend. We've had a couple surprises so far this weekend, especially with a team in green. Not this team, the other team. And here are the results from sprint qualifying. Max Verstappen, with a brilliant lap, just about took away the pole position for the sprint, which in hindsight saved him from being tagged from behind and really won him the sprint race. So it was a very important pole position for the sprint from Max Verstappen. Lando Norris in second, Oscar Piastri third. Piastri once again lagging behind his teammate around this track. This is, we know, not a great track for Piastri. But still, in the top three, it's not bad or anything, but obviously he needs to be beating Lando Norris if he wants to get this championship wrapped up before Max Verstappen can possibly get involved. And then Nico Hülkenberg, fourth on the grid, only half a second off pole, quarter of a second quicker than the Mercedes and also the Aston Martin and the Williams, and nearly 0.4 of a second quicker than Ferrari. Incredible performance. And as you'll see with the sector time data, this is, I think we can say is rather than was, given what happened in the sprint race. I think it is legitimate pace. When we go through the sector time data, they're not just really quick in one part of the lap and average in the rest. They are genuinely, through the corners, really strong around this track this weekend. And we'll get into why that is in a moment. And then, Russell in fifth. Mercedes a bit disappointing this weekend. They are not anywhere near as quick as I hoped they would be. Alonso then in sixth. Aston Martin been a bit better than I expected so far this weekend. And Alonso only just pipped Carlos Sainz. Williams looking pretty strong, which is not really a shock to me, at least. I thought they would be pretty good here. And then Lewis Hamilton 8th, Alex Albon 9th, and Charles Leclerc in 10th. Ferrari, a midfield team this weekend. That is how far they have fallen with this car, especially, since the summer break, where they have just dropped off the pace so much. They are now a midfield team. Very, very embarrassing. And they will be doing well to get on the third row of the grid. That is how slow that Ferrari car is at this point, that they will do well to even get on the third row. Remember, 4 years ago here, when they were a midfield team, they actually were able to be in the top, I think, 4 or 5 on the grid. But, here in 2025, where they should be a lot better, they're 8th and 10th in sprint qualifying. Yeah, the result in the sprint race was better, but that was only really because of Hülkenberg, Norris, Piastri, and Alonso having that collision. The Ferrari isn't quicker than those cars, really, I don't think. So, yeah, just so disappointing from Ferrari, who look like they're going to have a pretty bad weekend. And then the rest of the order, Antonelli in 11th. Not a great performance from Antonelli, I must say, but he has never raced here before, so kind of excuse it. And then Isaac Hadjar in 12th, and then Gasly, Stroll, Lawson, Behrman, Colapinto, Sonoda, Ocon, Bortoleto 20th, Bortoleto, and other drivers who were knocked out in sprint qualifying 1. Quite unlucky because a lot of them were eliminated without a chance to improve at the end of the session because of traffic, especially with Bortoleto. So, I do feel quite a bit for Bortoleto because clearly the Sauber is very quick and he wasn't able to show it. But now we're going to go into real qualifying. Hopefully he can tap into that performance, because if he can, he could end up in the top 5, top 6 on the grid today. He really, really could. But let's get into the sector time data. And really what we're going to be looking at, obviously we'll be looking at, Red Bull and McLaren and how they compare to each other. But really what I want to look at is Sauber, to illustrate how genuine their pace is. Now, the first sector here at the Circuit of the Americas track is the most representative in showing through the corners who has the best car and, all the way down to who has the worst car. Not in general for every track, but around this track through the corners. In terms of the Red Bull McLaren fight, it's basically level between Red Bull and McLaren. They are pretty much equal through the corners, whether that is high speed, slow speed. It's, within, or it's at most a tenth of a second, the gap between the two, depending on whoever's ahead in what part of the lap. But it's really hundredths of a second we're talking about, which is obviously very small. And that's what's benefiting Max Verstappen this weekend, is because Red Bull and McLaren are pretty much on the same pace. Obviously, Max is better than Norris and Piastri, and that's what is allowing Max to get the job done. So as long as it stays that way, advantage Max Verstappen. The only way McLaren are going to beat Max this weekend is if they can somehow find a lot more pace compared to Red Bull, but not looking great for McLaren so far. But then, Sauber, third best team in the first sector. And then remember, the first sector, you've got a slow speed turn 1, but then after that, very high speed corners where the aerodynamics of your car really get tested well. You have to have a good car to cope well through that part of the lap. And Sauber, this weekend, do. Again, third fastest team, only a couple tenths of a second slower than Red Bull, only a tenth and a half slower than McLaren in that part of the lap. So that Sauber car is genuinely quick. It's not just really quick in the middle sector because it's really quick in a straight line or anything like that. It is genuinely fast because in the corners, it has a lot of grip. Not the most amount, but enough for it to be, pretty competitive. So Sauber's pace, just like with Williams, who are only just behind them, is genuine. They are both very fast and right in the fight, I would say, with Mercedes and Ferrari this weekend for, let's say, best of the rest behind Verstappen and the two McLarens. And then you got Ferrari in there. It's not a horrible first sector from them, but to be behind Sauber and Williams is embarrassing nonetheless. Mercedes, not great at all. And then Aston Martin, then a bit of a drop off then to Alpine and Racing Bulls. I've got to say, Racing Bulls, very much surprised at their lack of pace. I would have thought they'd be more likely to be in Sauber's position pace-wise this weekend, but they've not been, say, poor, but they are not looking like top 10 material really at all. So, yeah, not quite sure why. Really thought they would do well this weekend. This type of track really should suit their car well, but it isn't for whatever reason. And then Haas, absolutely miles off the pace. Again, not helped by the traffic situation at the end of sprint qualifying 1, but Haas this weekend just haven't looked like they've really got it together, unfortunately, like they had, say, in Singapore. But maybe they can improve it on that a bit today in qualifying. And then the middle sector is probably the least representative part of the track in terms of showing who genuinely has a good car here. Because, yeah, you've got some important corners, but then you've got a really long back straight where you can kind of skew that data in a way. And, again, not the most representative sector, as we've seen in the past as well. McLaren, though, the quickest through this part of the lap, only slightly quicker than Aston Martin and Red Bull, so no real difference. And then Mercedes, nearly a couple tenths off. Sauber, bit of a drop-off compared to certain teams like Aston Martin, let's say, and Mercedes, but still only a couple tenths of a second off the pace. So still a pretty good pace in the middle sector. And then Ferrari, I've got to say, so poor. Given that we know they have the fastest car in a straight line, for them to be a quarter of a second off the pace of McLaren in the middle sector just shows you how bad that car is through the corners. Because down the straight, that long back straight, Ferrari should be probably a few hundredths of a second quicker, but then they're just losing so much time to McLaren through the corners. So yeah, Ferrari nowhere near the pace of McLaren and Red Bull this weekend, absolutely nowhere near. And then Williams, not great, but okay. And then a big drop off to Racing Bulls, pretty much 8 tenths of a second off the pace. Again, not quite sure why they're that far off. And then Gasly, and then Oliver Behrman. No real surprise, Alpine being really far off in the middle part of the lap, but Haas once again not doing well. But then the final sector, you have a lot of corners, but it's a mix of high speed and slow speed corners. Again, like the first sector, Red Bull and McLaren pretty much on the same pace, but then Sauber third quickest and actually closer in the final part of the lap than they were in the first part of the lap. So, again, proving that Sauber's pace is genuine. Through the corners, their car is good. And hopefully, no confidence has been lost from the start of that sprint race, because there is a good car there for this weekend's Grand Prix. Same with Williams, who were also very quick in the final sector. Mercedes, 3 tenths off Red Bull. That's just really way too much to be losing in this part of the lap. Mercedes have looked more like midfield runners, really, this weekend. And then, yeah, Ferrari as well. 3.5 tenths off. Just absolutely rubbish from them, quite frankly. And then you've got Aston Martin, Racing Bulls, Alpine and Haas over a second off the pace in just the final sector alone. But very interesting pecking order, I think, going into qualifying. In terms of the battle between Red Bull and McLaren, it's not really a surprise compared to what I expected coming into this weekend's Grand Prix. I thought Red Bull and McLaren would be on pretty much the same pace and Max would make the difference like he has so far this weekend, and I think he'll continue in that vein. But I did think Mercedes would be definitely third quickest and not that far behind, say, Red Bull and McLaren. But yeah, Mercedes quite a bit further behind, and they're not the third fastest team by the looks of it. Looks like it is quite potentially Sauber, who I did not think would be even in the top 10 this weekend, never mind in the top 5. So, yeah, that is a real big surprise. Also, Aston Martin, a bit stronger in quali trim than I was expecting. I thought they'd be a bit stronger in the race, to be honest, but looking good over a single lap. And looking very competitive, I must say, between Sauber, Mercedes, Aston Martin, Williams and Ferrari. That battle from, say, 4th place all the way down to 11th, 12th, it's going to be a good battle in this session coming up in just over an hour, and also in the race tomorrow, especially if Sauber, Aston Martin and Williams can get themselves into good grid positions. But I'm gonna put it out there. I think Sauber have got the third fastest car here for qualifying. Whether they'll have that for the race is a completely different story. But for qualifying, I'm going for it. I think they've got the third fastest car. 4th fastest, honestly, I'd probably say Williams 4th fastest, but I don't think it will necessarily translate into them having the grid position they deserve, because you've got Alonso in the Aston Martin, who's pretty quick, and Russell in the Mercedes, who are probably quicker over a qualifying lap than Sainz and Albon are, which might hurt Williams's grid position for tomorrow's race. But Williams have genuinely got a very fast car this weekend, no doubt about it. So yeah, Williams, I'd say 4th. 5th, I'd probably say Mercedes, only just ahead of Aston Martin. And then after that, you'd have to say Ferrari, 6th fastest team. Again, absolute disaster. I thought coming here they'd be 4th or 5th fastest, but 6th fastest is taking the piss, quite frankly. But Ferrari, that's what they do at the moment. They are a complete shambles ending this season. And then after that, you'd have to say Racing Bulls in what do you call it? Racing Bulls in 7th place. And then 8th. Wait, hold on. I've missed out a team. I'm pretty sure. Have I missed out a team? I think I have missed out a team. Yeah, what was it? Red Bull, McLaren, Sauber, Williams, Mercedes, Aston Martin. Oh, so Ferrari. No, Ferrari will be the 7th fastest team, not the 6th fastest. Sorry. I accidentally skipped one. So yeah, Ferrari, I think, will be the 7th fastest team, which, yeah, it's just a complete disaster. And then Racing Bulls should be 8th best. 9th best looks like it's going to be probably Alpine. And then the slowest team, probably, and sadly, Haas F1, the home team this weekend. But given all that data and my thoughts as to what the pecking order probably is for this qualifying session, let's get into my qualifying prediction, which is, I wouldn't say it's a surprise. I mean, it is to a degree, but it's, what's the word I'm looking for? It is quite ambitious, put it that way. So the top 3, I think, will remain the same as it was in sprint qualifying. Max Verstappen, I think, takes pole by about a 1/10 of a second from Lando Norris. Oscar Piastri will be a bit closer, but still be 3rd. And then 4th and 5th, I am going Gabriel Bortoleto and Nico Hülkenberg. Yes, I am going for Sauber to qualify 4th and 5th for this Grand Prix. We will see whether they can actually pull it off, but I believe, put it that way, I believe in the speed that they have shown so far. George Russell, I think, will be 6th. Leclerc will improve on his own performance from sprint qualifying and put the Ferrari in 7th, even though I don't actually think the Ferrari is quicker than the Aston Martin or Williams. I think the only reason Leclerc will get 7th is more so because of him being quicker in qualifying than Alonso and Sainz rather than the Ferrari being quicker. And then Alonso, just behind, I think, will be in 8th. Carlos Sainz in 9th. And then Lewis Hamilton, I think, just about gets into the top 10 ahead of Alex Albon and Kimi Antonelli. It'll be very close between the 2 Ferraris, Alonso, the 2 Williams, and Antonelli in qualifying. And that Q2 session, we could see some big surprises, no doubt about it. But that's my predictions, guys, for qualifying. Let me know in the live chat what you think. Do you think I'm absolutely mental for going for Sauber 4th and 5th, or do you believe in their speed as well? Let me know in the chat, and also make sure to vote in that poll running at the top of the live chat, and let me know who you think will take pole position for the United States Grand Prix. Will it be Verstappen, Norris, Piastri, or Russell taking pole? By the way, for everyone watching, make sure to smash the like button. Obviously does help the channel in the algorithm, smashing the like button, but it helps also show me that you guys enjoy the content, so make sure to do that. Let's try and get up to 20 plus likes if we can for the stream. And make sure, if you are new to the channel, to subscribe for more content like this. We've only got a few races left this season, but there's still plenty of streams that I'll be doing covering the final few Grand Prix of the year. Let me just come back to this screen and let me just quickly get the countdown back up. Let me just wait for the next minute to take over, and then we'll get it up. There you go. Hour and 2 minutes to go until we are underway for this US Grand Prix. So, before I get into your comments in the chat, and make sure to post your comments in chat or questions you have. Again, make sure to post them in the chat. Just wanted to, as usual, quickly do a channel update. I like to do these, obviously, pretty much at every Grand Prix, just to let you guys know what's happening for the next week or two on the channel. So, and let me just readjust myself. There you go. So, of course, this is the beginning, this Grand Prix, of a double header. Next weekend is the Mexico City Grand Prix from, of course, Mexico City. And the plan is this. So, obviously, I'm doing this stream. Tomorrow, I will be doing a race watch along. I will be live 2 hours before the race starts at 6 p.m. UK time for the 8 p.m. UK time start of the Grand Prix. Just so you know, my co-commentator, Niblo, will not be joining me, unfortunately, for the US Grand Prix watch-along because he's unable to. So it will just be a solo watch-along. And then on Monday evening, I'll upload a podcast reviewing the events of the US Grand Prix. And then next weekend, I will only be doing a qualifying watch-along for the Mexican Grand Prix. And I'll be live for that stream at the same time I went live for this one, 8:30 p.m. UK time, for obviously the build-up, and then a watch-along of qualifying itself. Even though I'm not doing a race watch-along, though, next weekend for Mexico, there will be a podcast the day after reviewing whatever happens in the Mexican Grand Prix, so don't worry, there'll be that content. And then, of course, after that, there's a 2-week break until Brazil. I'll get more so into what the plan is for that Grand Prix probably next week when I do my qualifying watch along for the Mexican Grand Prix. But yeah, in this next week or so, there is plenty of content on the channel covering these next two very important Grand Prix, of course, for the championship. One other thing I can announce as well is I am going to start working on my winter break content probably once we're done with the Sao Paulo Grand Prix in Brazil, which is in 3 weeks' time. So once we're done with that Grand Prix, I'll probably start cracking on with the content. And then once the season's done in December, there should be 3 or 4 videos hopefully on the channel between the final race and Christmas, and then loads more in January and February as well. So yeah, just a quick update as to what's the plan with the channel and all. And if you're wondering, yeah, uni is going absolutely fine so far. I think we're just about halfway through the first module now. I don't know if it was this week or next week, is about halfway through the first module. So yeah, it's going decently well. I'll probably know more about whether I'm going to get a decent grade to start this course probably in say 3 or 4 weeks from now. But yeah, it's going decently well, and obviously that's my main focus away from these streams. But yeah, going decently well so far. But let's now hear what you guys have to say in the chat. Again, let me know what your predictions for qualifying are. Who do you think takes pole? How do you think the battle between Verstappen and the two McLarens will shape up? You know, who wins that battle? And also let me know your thoughts in regards to the championship battle. Do you think, especially after the sprint race, where Max gained 8 points on his two championship rivals, do you think Max can win his 5th world championship? Let me know in the chat, as we've got just under an hour to go until we're underway, as I'm just watching Sky F1 at the minute, who are showing replays of the start of the sprint race. And yeah, it's pretty obvious Nico Hulkenberg at fault for the start, the collision on the first corner between him, Alonso, and the two McLarens. To be fair, Hulkenberg couldn't really go anywhere, but yeah, he still was the instigator in all of that. But I think what I'll do, I'll try and let a couple comments build up, is I'll have a quick drink of my water, and then we'll get into your comments for the next, say, half an hour, and then we'll get into some other things in the build up to this all important qualifying. Right, let's see what you guys have to say. And hello to all of you in the chat, and obviously everyone watching. Hope you're all doing well. As Crystal saying, Max Verstappen, and he's replaced the S in Verstappen with 5, is inevitable. Still, you'd have to say, again, odds are against Max, but with every race that passes, it looks more, I wouldn't say more likely, but the chances, percentage-wise, grow every Grand Prix. At this moment, I would say there's probably a 30% chance that Max is going to win the championship. But if he wins the race tomorrow, you could maybe say it's a 40% chance. Or if Piastri doesn't finish the race, you could say it's a 80% chance. It really is interesting how this comeback is unfolding, and can the two McLaren drivers stop Max from pulling off really the unthinkable? And not only that, and I know obviously the collision that happened in the sprint, it's unlucky for the two McLaren drivers, so they couldn't do anything about it. But if Max does win the championship somehow, the McLaren drivers have got to take a look in the mirror at themselves. Because how on earth, especially from Oscar Piastri's point of view, how on earth are you letting Max Verstappen win the championship if he does? How on earth are you letting that happen when he was like 100 points behind a few races ago? Not saying again that it's going to happen, that Max is going to win the championship, but if it does happen, then not just Piastri but Lando as well have got to take a long, hard look in the mirror at themselves. Because if you surrender a lead like that, I mean, what chance do you ever have of beating Verstappen for a championship? Chris was saying I wrote that 2005 Kimi would bully Lando and Oscar at Monza out of disgust. That tweet has aged marvelously. Absolutely. And yeah, Crystal saying in the chat, Max was 100 points down pre Monza. I think the gap was like 103 or 105 points. And again, we all said that it was over for him. Even after he won the Italian Grand Prix, we still said it was over. It wasn't until that race in Baku where I think we started to think, especially after Piastri crashed out the way he did, where we started to think, oh, does Matt, is Max actually, is he back in it? And with every passing race, even sprint race, you'd have to say, yeah. Red Will saying, pretty aggressive and dumb move from Piastri. He tried doing the switchback, acting like there was no other car. I see what you mean, but you can't. If you're wheel to wheel and close with another car ahead of you, you can't be looking in your mirror as well. It's a lose-lose situation, because if you're looking in your mirror too much, trying to avoid getting hit from behind, then you'll end up giving away a chance at overtaking a car ahead. But then if you try to overtake a car ahead and you focus on that too much, then you can end up getting hit from behind. You can't win. I don't think Piastri did anything wrong, really. Red Will as well saying, I still can't decide whether Piastri or Norris deserves the championship, so I'll just go for Verstappen. Still, for me, I think Oscar Piastri is more of a worthy champion than Lando Norris. I think Piastri has performed quite a bit better than Lando this season. I know the gap is only, what, 22 points, I think it is, between Piastri and Norris. Even though that is still the gap and it is relatively close, I still think Piastri's been the better man. And I think, looking at the head to heads, the race wins that Piastri's had compared to Norris, I still think Piastri's been the better driver. But in terms of, who's been the best driver this season, or who potentially is most deserving champion, I think if Max keeps up this rate of form to the end of the season, even if he doesn't win the championship, I think we'd have to say Max was probably the deserving champion, given just how much better this season he has been compared to everyone. Ghost saying, call me delusional, but I'm expecting at least a podium from Hamilton or Leclerc. Yeah, you're delusional. Sorry to say, but yeah, that is pretty delusional. The car just isn't good enough. I mean, look at the sprint race. You had 4 cars ahead of the 2 Ferraris knocked out of action, and they still couldn't finish in the top 3. That's how slow they've been this weekend. They are mixing it really in the back end of the top 10 at best. And that is obviously Ferrari nowhere near good enough. Remember this time last year, they at this track they locked out the second row and then they went on to get a 1-2 in the race. One of the best race performances we've seen from Ferrari in years. It was unbelievable how quick they were. They were at times half a second a lap quicker than everybody else, or than half a second quicker than the next car. They genuinely dominated that race. And here we are a year later, and we're talking about them struggling to even get in the top 6. You know, it is genuinely embarrassing from Ferrari what we've seen, not just this season, but especially since the summer break. And I know, I think someone, I think Seirugara in the comments of my podcast corrected me when I said in my podcast that Ferrari have not had a podium since Austria. That's not actually true. They did have a podium at Spa, which was actually a pretty good podium that Leclerc was able to take, and Ferrari recovered from what was a poor start to that weekend initially. But you know, one podium in like 4 months is diabolical, absolutely diabolical. And as I said in my podcast, my last podcast, which if you haven't seen, make sure to go check out. We've still got another 45 minutes until qualifying begins. I said it in that podcast when talking about Ferrari that even though I wouldn't stack Fred Vasseur, the team boss, because 2026 is only just around the corner and is, you know, complete new set of regulations, and you may as well wait and see where Ferrari are at. You can't blame Ferrari if they sack him. You can't blame them at all because the results are that bad at this point that it almost doesn't matter whether, or it almost doesn't matter what the car is like next year because the results are so intolerable now that something has to be done, you could argue. But again, personally, I would wait till next year, say till next spring, and then see where, you know, where Ferrari are at, where things are at in general. But sure, it's not looking good. This is the worst Ferrari have been in 4 or 5 years. Again, even in 2021, when they were a midfield team, that was a season also, and that was actually their last season where they didn't win a race. Even in that season, they looked closer to winning a race than they have been this year. That is how bad this year has become for Ferrari. By the way, cheers to Crystal saying nice to hear. And also saying Hulken Goat taking one for the sport. That move by Hulkenberg, in the end, we don't know it yet, but that move by Hulkenberg in the sprint, that might just win Max Verstappen his 5th World Championship. Again, we don't know yet because we have no idea what's going to happen in these final 6 Grand Prix. But in the end, those 8 points gained, an extra maybe 5 or 6 points compared to what it would have been in Abu Dhabi might make the difference. So we will see whether that does turn out to be the case. It'd be pretty bad, in my opinion, if it did. One little incident in a sprint race deciding the championship. But you never know how things are going to play out. Darth Lord Rover saying, "Hey Tezza, mate, how are you? I'm good. Hopefully you're good. If Max wins tomorrow, the championship is back open. Question mark. Is he most likely to win in Mexico as well? I think if he wins the race tomorrow, definitely the championship is back on 100%. Doesn't mean he will 100% win it, but it is 100% back on. Because remember, if he wins the race tomorrow and Piastri finishes second, the gap goes down to 48 points with 5 races and 2 sprints to go after this weekend. Meaning that Max would basically have to win all the remaining races and Piastri would have to finish, third? Which is doable. That is, again, it is doable. So, I mean, we'll have to see because you don't know. I mean, I thought Max was going to win this race last year. I was certain of it. And he ended up only just taking third. So, who knows? But if he does win here, yeah, absolutely it's back on. And in Mexico, you would have to put him down as one of the favourites because, I mean, he is unbelievable around that track. Max has won the Mexico City Grand Prix. Is it 5 times? I think he's won that race. So why wouldn't he be the favourite? But yeah, we'll ultimately have to see. But with Verstappen, I think with Max, that's actually playing to his advantage. Is that he knows he just has to win all the remaining races, which is a lot easier to know, I think, going into the final few races of a championship battle rather than this type of finish or that type of finish might be enough. If you know that you've got to win all the remaining races, then, it simplifies the task, even though the task is more difficult than it is probably for Piastri to win the championship. Because Piastri, for example, doesn't have to win all of the remaining races. Piastri doesn't really have to win any of the remaining races to win the championship. Just needs to make sure he does enough to end up on top when it's all said and done, which is a bit more awkward. But yeah, I think if Max wins this weekend, absolutely, it's back on. From Oscar Piastri's point of view, though, I think he probably has done this. He's a smart guy, but I think he just needs to simplify what his task is. As long as Oscar Piastri beats Lando Norris over the remaining races and doesn't have any big non-point score finishes, like he had in the sprint or like he had in Baku, for example, then he probably wins the championship. Because, again, for Max to win the championship, Max needs to win every race remaining, basically, and Piastri has to finish no better than third. If Piastri can beat his teammate, say, 2 or 3 times in the final 6 races, you would imagine he'd be able to finish second, maybe a couple times, and that would obviously hurt then Max Verstappen's chances of catching and passing Piastri for the lead. So for Piastri, again, I think it's as simple as just beat your teammate, and he should get the job done. For Lando Norris, I think his task is the most complicated, because even if he beats Piastri over the remaining races and overtakes Piastri even in the championship by the time we get to the end of the season, he still might not end up winning the championship. Max could still overtake them both, because Max obviously is a lot closer to Lando in the championship. Max is only, if you're wondering, he's only 33 points behind Lando Norris, which is not a lot. So that's the difficult thing from Lando's perspective, is even if he outdoes Oscar and beats Oscar in the championship, he could still end up not winning it, because Max is, I wouldn't say right on his tail, but he's nearly there. So interesting. It's gonna be interesting how it plays out for sure. Red Will saying, if the incident was not Piastri's fault, then it would be a racing incident. Hulkenberg went for a realistic move around the inside and was joined by Alonso. Piastri attempted a switchback and there was nothing the Hulk could do. I'm not saying Hulkenberg should get a penalty, but I think, Hulkenberg, if there was anyone to blame for the accident, I would say it's Hulkenberg. But I'm not saying Hulkenberg should get a penalty. It is a racing incident. Hulkenberg, he couldn't go to the inside anymore because Alonso was there. And then Piastri cut across him because Piastri was trying to do a switchback on Norris. But there's nothing. And remember, this is all heat of the moment. And, there's very little you can do when it's all happening so quickly. I don't think there's anything any of those drivers could have done differently other than just deliberately not race and slow down massively, which obviously you can't expect at all from a driver. Other than that, I don't think any of the drivers could have done anything differently to avoid that accident. So yeah, it's a racing incident, but again, if there's anyone to blame, you'd probably have to say it's Hulkenberg. But yeah, let me know if there's any other people in the chat that have seen the incident. Let me know what you think of the incident at the start of the sprint race. Who was at fault and what your thoughts of it were. As we've got about 35 minutes to go until qualifying gets underway. Hello to Yanni. Good to see you. Red Wolf says Verstappen winning USA and Mexico would be when the Verstappen title challenge is actually on. Maybe, but I think if he wins this weekend, I think it's pretty much on at that point, especially given that the Red Bull and McLaren cars are basically equal at this point, which again suits Max because he is better than Norris and Piastri, and all Max needs in that situation is a car equal to or better than to beat those two. But that's the thing with Max, is even if he wins all the remaining races, he could still end up not winning the championship. And could be one of the very few drivers in Formula One history to win the most races in a Formula One season and not win the championship. Very well could happen. But again, we'll just have to wait and see what happens in these remaining races. That's the beauty of, coming to these races and ultimately finding out what happens. But one thing I will say, and this is not a diss on Piastri and Norris, this is just, it's the truth, and I think you guys will probably agree. It is so much better having, I think, Verstappen in the championship fight and having a three-way championship fight as well, because I'll be honest, the title fight between Piastri and Norris has been pretty boring because not really much has happened between the two. And it's not really been a championship battle that we're really going to remember in years to come. So I'm happy in that way that Max is back in things, because it's going to really spice up these final races and spice up the championship battle. Crystal saying, despite it being close to the first half of 2025 was a cure for insomnia. I wouldn't go that far, but it was very underwhelming, put it that way. We only had, to what I can remember, probably 2 or 3 races that were genuinely exciting. A lot of them were just pretty average, really. From the first half of the season, the only races I can remember that were actually that good were Melbourne, Bahrain, Imola. And that's probably it. Even Silverstone, I know it was a wet race, but even that race wasn't that great. It's nowhere near as good as the 2024 race. Probably, and maybe people will criticize me for saying this, I don't care. This year's British Grand Prix was probably the worst British Grand Prix we've had in nearly 10 years in terms of an exciting race. Shows you the level of the British Grand Prix, though, as of late, because it was still a decent race, but nowhere near some of the ones we've had in the past few years. But yeah, it has been, like I said, it's been an underwhelming season. I think with how competitive and close things were in the second half of 2024 and how exciting most of that season was, we really had high hopes for this year. But I think and maybe it's harsh to blame this particular team, but I'm really going to blame Ferrari for this. Ferrari especially did not turn up to the party this year. If Ferrari kept up the speed they had at the end of 2024, which was not quite as good as McLaren, but it was close enough where they could fight McLaren and beat McLaren in certain races, I think we would have had a much more exciting 2025. But as we've seen, Ferrari have not even won a race this season, and they're not going to, unless a miracle happens. Question, do you think there'll be another collision in turn 1? Probably, but I don't think it'll be anywhere near as dramatic as what happened earlier. But before I come on to any more comments, make sure to keep your comments coming, by the way, in the live chat. I'm just going to quickly post a link for the stream out one final time before we get into this session. So let me just quickly do that, as we are about half an hour now away from the start of qualifying. Come to Watchalong. Qualifying in Texas. There you go. Hopefully we'll get some more jumping on. And yeah, what I'm going to do. And hello, by the way, to Todd. Good to see you. And also Sarah Gara, good to see you as well. I will read out a few more of your comments, and then we're going to get on to a couple other things in this build-up to qualifying, such as a roundup of the teams and just a general expectation of where I think teams will be for qualifying. And I will do, obviously, a reminder of what my qualifying prediction is. So, yeah, we'll get on to that soon. Just going to quickly mute myself, have a quick drink, clear my throat, and then I'll be back reading a couple more of your comments. Right, let's see what other comments we have. And yeah, Todd saying crazy sprint race. Like I said, I've only seen the results of the sprint and also a clip of the start. I didn't actually watch any of the sprint live because I was out in town at the time. So, yeah. I mean, the reason I didn't watch the sprint is mainly because, obviously, one, I don't like sprints, but secondly, I was expecting a pretty comfortable Max Verstappen win ahead of the two McLarens, which I think is what would have happened if there wasn't the collision. But yeah, that collision, changed things quite a bit, obviously. But it did present some drivers to get a few extra points than they were normally going to have, especially Carlos Sainz, who ended up third in that sprint race. Carlos Sainz, by the way, with that result of third in the sprint, and that's 6 points you get for third in the sprint. Carlos Sainz is now in the top 10 of the Drivers' Championship, believe it or not. He is only 1 point as well behind Isaac Hadjar. So, despite having a mostly terrible season, Carlos Sainz might be 9th in the championship by the end of this Grand Prix weekend. But that might still change around because Nico Hülkenberg is now 11th and a point behind Sainz. But if Hülkenberg can deliver the pace in the Sauber car that I think's there and not crash, then Hülkenberg probably can go back into the top 10 of the championship. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens there for Hülkenberg. Todd saying the crowd loves Colosac was loud. Good to see that he got a good reception. Darth Ray was saying the point is the clubs are off within McLaren. They have the Constructors' Championship. The drivers will want to have the Drivers' Championship. I see them collide again in one way or another. If you do read certain publications after that sprint race, you'll think that Piastri and Norris had a genuine crash and tear up on track, but it was caused by others behind them. So it wasn't a real teammate collision. It was unlucky, quite frankly, with how it all happened. So it wasn't wasn't a real teammate collision like we've seen in the past. Let me see if I can find a couple more comments quick. Paul James Scribb says, I guess Oscar is more to blame than anyone else for trying to switch back on turn one when surrounded by cars, but it's still probably seen as a racing incident where nobody was at fault. Again, I can understand why people will blame Piastri for doing a switchback, but you can't you can't just not try to do an overtaking move just because there might be a car on your inside or here or there. Again, you don't have time to look ahead of you and in your mirrors and make a judgment, a good judgment especially, that quickly. So I don't, again, maybe Piastri could have decided to do something different, but that's all hindsight. I don't think he did anything wrong in the moment where I would say, yeah, he really should have not done that and should have looked in his mirrors or thought better. He, made a decision and it didn't come off because he had two cars on the inside of him who, one, Alonso basically forced Hulkenberg into, I wouldn't say a full sandwich, but kind of a sandwich. So, yeah. Again, maybe you could say Piastri shouldn't have tried it, but I think really you can only say that in terms of the power of hindsight rather than something that he could have actually done at the time. Because, what if the start had played out in a way where he did have the room to do that switchback? You just don't know. You can't, you have to just commit to a strategy and go for it. And if it don't work out, it don't work out. If it does, then great. But yeah. But yeah, it's just a racing incident, nothing more. I've seen that Lance Stroll has been given a 5-place grid penalty for a collision with Esteban Ocon. I haven't actually seen the collision, but yeah, I'm not surprised. Don't forget about Singapore, McLaren. They were close to a crash already. Absolutely. As I said in my podcast, though, after Singapore, it was a clumsy. What was it? Lando's. What was the word I used? I can't remember exactly what the word I used was, but yeah, that was it. Lando's execution of the move that he did was clumsy, but he was absolutely right in going for that move. Anyone, if you're, I'm not going to do the whole Ayrton Senna meme of if you don't go for a gap and all that rubbish, because that is really overplayed at this point and also lacks context. But you have to go for that move if you're in Lando Norris's position. But it was a clumsy execution because he tagged the back of Max and pretty stiffly hit the front left tyre of his teammate. And you can see why Piastri was miffed about that, because it could have resulted in Piastri being put in the wall, which obviously would not have been good for the team wrapping up the Constructors' Championship. So, yeah. Anyway, keep your comments coming because I will get on to probably a couple more before we get into qualifying, as we've only got 20 more minutes until we're underway for qualifying. But before we get into any more comments, let's just do a quick roundup of the teams as to what we expect of them in this session. For McLaren, simply, they have to, if they can, deliver pole position. I think you could argue that they do have the slightly faster car than Red Bull, and that it's Max that's not entirely, but say mostly making the difference in terms of him ending up quicker. But if McLaren, if there is any way they can get pole, they have to get pole. It would be a big moment for them, not just for the team, but especially for their drivers, who I do feel, since Max Verstappen has begun this great run of form, I do feel like Norris and Piastri have definitely shrunk a bit in confidence compared to Verstappen, which is not going to help their case. Max Verstappen does continue to gain lots of points on the two McLaren drivers. So if they can get pole, they absolutely must get it. It would be a big confidence boost for either one of their two drivers. And of course, for both Norris and Piastri, they both need to beat each other in this session. So we'll see who comes out on top. For Red Bull, pole position is absolutely possible. The car is good enough to be in the fight, but whether they get pole or not is down to Max Verstappen. As long as Max delivers his best possible lap and his maximum, no pun intended, performance, then I don't see McLaren being able to beat them. Because Norris and Piastri, yes, at their best, they are very quick drivers, but they are not on the same level as Max Verstappen, especially when the Red Bull and McLaren car are pretty much equal this weekend in performance. So it's all down to Max, which is great for Max, because that is not only when you get to see him at his best, but in terms of the championship, that's what he needs, because in a straight fight between the drivers, Max wins every time, especially when it's him against Norris and Piastri. So we'll see whether Max can deliver pole position. Remember, Max has not had pole here in Texas in 4 years, so it's not a sure done thing with Verstappen. Ferrari are absolute garbage this weekend. They are nowhere near where they were this time last year, where they brilliantly went on to win this Grand Prix and dominate it, really. For qualifying, honestly, I think they'll do well to get a car on the third row, which is incredible to say about this team. But they are genuinely that slow. So we will see where they will end up. Their best hopes are with Charles Leclerc. Lewis Hamilton, I think, is doing well enough this weekend, but I still feel as though there is maybe a tad more potential in the Ferrari car than what has been shown so far. So, yeah, we will see ultimately who ends up ahead. But if you're a Ferrari fan, you will probably want to watch this session from behind the couch, because it's not going to be pretty viewing. Mercedes, nowhere near as strong, unfortunately, as I was expecting and as a lot of us were expecting. George Russell is doing the best he can, but yeah, the car just isn't there. I think for Russell, the aim has got to be just get in the top 5 and see what happens. If he could get a top 5, I think he'd be satisfied with that, given where they've been this weekend. For Antonelli, I think for him, it's just make Q3. As long as he makes Q3, I think that's a good enough job from him, given that Mercedes, it really is not that quick this weekend. But yeah, disappointing performance so far. Will we suddenly see a sudden burst of speed like we saw in Singapore 2 weeks ago, where we thought they were on the back foot and then they took pole? I hope so, but I doubt it. Keep your eye out for Aston Martin. They're looking pretty good, especially Fernando Alonso, who has been consistently in the top 10 this weekend. And Alonso definitely could be a contender for a 4th row or even a 3rd row grid position. Just depends on how it shakes out with Alonso compared to the rivals of, Williams, Sauber, Mercedes, and the others like that. Alpine, not the slowest team this weekend for a change by the looks of it, but still very slow. Haas, very disappointing. Don't know why they've been so bad this weekend, to be honest. they've not had the greatest amount of luck either, so maybe they've got a lot more potential to show, but I'd be very surprised if they were anywhere near Q3. Racing Bulls as well, disappointing so far. I really hope we can see a lot better from them this qualifying session. I was really expecting them to be arguably the best midfield team this weekend, but yeah, they've not looked like that whatsoever. But maybe there is a lot more potential in that car to be found that hasn't been shown yet. So we will see where they're at in qualifying. Williams, keep your eye on them. They are a dark horse, I think, for qualifying. Carlos Sainz has looked very good, and Albon has too. That Williams car really handling the Circuit of America's track well. Not only is the Williams car handling it well, so is this team, the Stake Sauber team. This is the strongest they've looked at a Grand Prix in 2 or 3 years. They look incredibly fast. Can they deliver what we saw yesterday in sprint qualifying? I think they can. But whether they actually do, we'll have to see. But I think a top 5, even with both cars, is possible. But both drivers need to be at their best if they're going to get it. And a reminder of my qualifying prediction. Verstappen, I think, takes pole from Norris second, Piastri third. And then I'm going for a wild one. Bortoletto fourth, Hülkenberg fifth. And Russell, Leclerc, Alonso, Sainz, and Hamilton. That's what I think the top 10 will be. We'll find out very soon whether it will be or not. As we have got only, I think, about 12 more minutes to go until qualifying is underway in Austin, Texas. And I'll make sure to get the countdown back up when we get to the next minute. And make sure, as usual, to keep your comments coming in the live chat. I'll make sure to read out 2 or 3 more before we get into this session. As Sky F1 just reviewing some onboards at the penultimate corner, which has been a corner that's caused controversy in the past in terms of track limits. There you go, 12 minutes to go. Right, let's see what you guys are having to say. Paul James Chris, will the McLaren cars be okay? Yeah, they'll be fine. The damage wasn't as bad as it looked. I know it looked quite dramatic, the wheel or the tyre coming off, but yeah, the McLarens will be fine. They've had, 3 hours since the sprint, so that's plenty of time to get those cars fixed and ready. Crystal saying Zach Brown talking out of his own exhaust. Yeah, Zach's not been a very popular figure in the F1 community in the last couple of weeks or so. Redwell, his prediction is Piastri on pole, and then Verstappen second, Russell third, and then Norris, Sainz, Albon, Alonso, Leclerc, Hadjar, and Antonelli. I think I know you had Russell in third, didn't you? I thought you had Russell missing the top 10. I think actually that prediction is decently possible, I would say. I think the most surprising part is you've gone Williams on the third row, but I think that's actually a possibility. Not saying it will happen, but I think there's a small chance that Williams could do that today. As well, before we get into the session, make sure to smash the like button. We're on 23 likes. Let's try and get up to 40 plus likes if we can in the next 10 minutes or so. Paul James Squibs asking, does anyone understand these papaya rules? It's just a load of rubbish, isn't it? I think the media has played it up a lot more than really it needs to be. Piastri actually did an interview. I don't know if it was with Sky F1 or who I think it might have been. He did an interview back at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix where he said basically papaya rules is don't crash into each other. Which technically Norris broke that in Singapore, even though Piastri didn't, suffer badly from the contact. But that's basically what that means. Which, I mean, pretty simple. Yeah, don't crash into each other if you're teammates. No shit. One thing I will say, though, is I think Piastri very much might be regretting giving those 3 points to Lando Norris at Monza, which actually was a 6-point swing that moment. Because he might need those points come the end of the season. But who knows how it's going to play out and whether this or that would have cost, whatever driver. Crystal saying, I can't wait for McLaren to do a double stack when the leading car has a 18.7 second pit stop due to a jammed right front and the other driver wants a position swap. It is an absolute joke, honestly. What happened, especially what happened in Monza, it was so stupid. One of the dumbest things I've seen from any Formula One team. It really was. One thing though, before we get into qualifying, I have to give Zach Brown a lot of credit, and I did kind of give him some credit in my last podcast, but I didn't talk about it really enough because I didn't want to go too over with how much I talked about McLaren at that time. But let's give Zach Brown a lot of credit. When he took over McLaren, as in he took over the operation of that team, McLaren were in the absolute gutter. They were one of the biggest jokes in motorsport. Not Formula One, motorsport. And even under his watch, we had the whole Fredo Gate thing in 2018, which I'm not going to explain that whole controversy scandal, but just go and Google McLaren Fredo Gate 2018, and I'm sure you'll find some story on it. And it is just hilarious how bad it was back then for McLaren. But, since then, once he was able to actually, have some time in that role and start to influence the big decisions on a regular basis, McLaren have gone from strength to strength. And ever since they became a front-running team, they've delivered more than we could have possibly imagined. 2 constructors' titles in a row. Something McLaren haven't done since the very early 90s, which was the end of their most dominant period in Formula One. And I even said it in my podcast, we could be in the middle of McLaren's most successful period in their history. We just don't know it yet. And that's all thanks to Zach Brown. Whether you like him or not, or think he's shady, I know he's having that whole court case with Alex Palou at the moment about the whole contract situation. Whether you like him personally or not, you've got to give him credit for what he has done for McLaren in terms of results and production. He is, well, technically he's not a team principal, but he deserves a lot of credit for what he's done with that team. Way more credit he deserves than a lot of others on the grid who get it. And quite frankly, I think he deserves way more credit than Toto Wolff for anything that Toto Wolff has done in his entire career. Because whether people like it or not, when Toto took over the Mercedes team in terms of the Mercedes team principal role, Mercedes were already dominating. They didn't need Toto Wolff. it was all in place. Zach actually had to put it in place, like, say, Ross Brawn did with Mercedes back in the day. So, yeah, what Zach has done is absolutely incredible. And when it's all said and done, he will be one of the biggest legends from a management perspective that this sport has seen in the last 20, 30 years, because he is the one that finally ended the misery that McLaren were going through. Anyway, before we go any further on that subject, we've only got 4 minutes to go, guys, until qualifying begins at the US Grand Prix. So let's get into a couple final important details before we start this session. And we'll start with the championship standings. And this is how the top 10 looks after the sprint race. Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris did not score any points in the sprint. Max Verstappen in third. Max is now only 55 points behind with 6 Grand Prix and 2 sprints to go. It's very much doable. Max Verstappen may be winning his 5th World Championship. George Russell 4th. Russell now under 100 points off the lead. Obviously, he's not going to win the championship, but just shows you how great he's been. To somehow be under 100 points off the lead, given that Mercedes have been significantly slower pretty much the whole season. Charles Leclerc in 5th. Lewis Hamilton 6th. Antonelli in 7th. Alex Albon 8th. Hadjar in 9th. And Carlos Sainz, after a mostly poor season, is now in the top 10 of the championship. Only 1 point behind Hadjar after finishing 3rd in the sprint. On the Constructors' side, McLaren are the champions for the Constructors' Championship. Mercedes in 2nd, but only 2nd by 26 points over Ferrari. Red Bull, though, are catching very quickly. Red Bull only 33 points behind now Mercedes in the championship. Red Bull, I'm not saying they're likely to finish 2nd in the championship, but it's very much looking doable at this point. Williams in 5th. They're surely going to wrap that up, that position, for 2025. Racing Bulls in 6th, only 4 points clear of Aston Martin. Sauber in 8th. Haas in 9th. And Alpine last of all. Let's go through some key stats regarding the front-running teams coming into this session. McLaren's last pole position here at COTA was last year with Lando Norris. Can he deliver it again? And that's their only pole at this track in the last 10 years. And actually, that's their only pole position ever at the Circuit of the Americas track. And last year, 1st and 5th it was in qualifying for the team. For Red Bull, their last pole position here at the Circuit of the Americas was in 2021 with Max Verstappen, one of the best pole positions of his career. Big weekend that was in him winning the championship that year. But that is their only pole for Red Bull at this circuit in the last 10 years. They've not been very successful in qualifying in the last decade. 2nd and 10th it was for the team last year. They'll be disappointed if they don't get pole today. Ferrari, they've been pretty successful in qualifying as of late at this circuit. 2 years ago was their last pole with Charles Leclerc here at the Circuit of the Americas. And they've taken 2 poles here in the last 10 years. 3rd and 4th it was here last year in qualifying, which obviously led to a 1-2 in the race. If they got 3rd and 4th today, I think they would be very, very happy. And for Mercedes, their last pole here in Texas was in 2019 with Valtteri Bottas 6 years ago. That was the weekend where Lewis Hamilton won his 6th World Championship. They've been the most successful team at this track in qualifying in the last 10 years. 5 poles in the last 10 years. Last year, though, only 6th and 19th in qualifying. Surely they can do better than that. But here we go, guys. Q1 is about to get underway. And it will be an 18-minute long session where we'll knock out the 5 slowest cars. And there you go. Q1 and qualifying in Austin, Texas, a very hot Austin, Texas, has begun. We'll get on to the expected lap times in a moment in terms of the lap times to expect at the very top. So we've only got a few cars on the track at the moment. As Lando Norris we're looking at on the broadcast, he's still in his garage. By the way, make sure to smash the like button. We're on 25 likes. Let's try and get up to 40 plus if we can in these next few minutes. As we're looking on board now at Max Verstappen, who is in the pit lane, waiting for the cars ahead of him to get on with it so he can get out of the pit lane. Actually, no, it's Tsunoda? I thought it was Max. Or maybe it is Tsunoda. Don't quite know. Interesting striking livery with Racing Bulls for this weekend. It is not powering them to be any quicker, I can tell you that. And the same for McLaren, who've gone for a special livery as they always do. It's a shame they've not gone for the same livery that they had at this Grand Prix last year, the chrome, mixed with the papaya orange, because that was really nice last year. Looked great in the sunshine, as does chrome cars. As we're looking at Esteban Ocon for the home team, Haas F1, starting his first qualifying run. The fastest lap times in this session should be a mid 1 minute 32. So if you want to get through to Q2, you're going to have to do probably a 1:33.2 or a 1:33.3 or better to make sure of your place in Q2. So keep your eye on the lap times, and again, whoever's quicker than a 1:33.2 or 3. As Ocon braking hard for turn 11, the final corner before the massive back straight. Ocon, he's had a couple decent results here in the past, but he's never had like a really great result. As Isaac Hadjar has he's got into the barriers in the first sector at turn, and there's a red flag, and it's at turn, what turn is it? I think it's turn 4 or 5, and he's really damaged the rear end of that car quite severely. That is unusual for him. A poor mistake, and he's punching himself for having made it. So Isaac Hadjar is out. With 14 minutes and 51 seconds left on the clock, red flag. And that's going to take a few minutes to clear that car and make sure the barrier is in good condition. We'll see a replay in a moment. And Hadjar just looks really angry with himself. And here we go. Into turn 3, 4. And then turns into turn, I think, 6. And the rear end just steps out. I don't think there's anything Hadjar could have done about that, really. I mean, obviously don't crash, but I don't think he expected the rear end to come out or come around like that. And then, hit the barrier quite hard. Thankfully, he is all okay. Front end went in first, so, car not as badly damaged as I thought it was. And, very angry with himself. But that was quite an unusual snap. You do see cars occasionally having trouble there, but not quite that badly. So there you go. First red flag. Hopefully the only red flag of this session. As both McLarens are still in the pits or in the garages. They've not even made out of the garages yet, despite that red flag. As we're looking at Leclerc in the Ferrari garage. Leclerc, who of course has had pole position here before and won this race so brilliantly last year. But he'll be lucky to be even within half a minute of the race winner tomorrow, given the difference in where Ferrari are at now compared to this time last year. As they're just showing Liam Lawson now on the broadcast. And yeah, it's all down to Lawson now to carry the team. Lawson has not been consistently that great in qualifying this season. Yeah, he's had a couple good results lately. Third, obviously, in Baku. He had the top 10 in Zandvoort in Hungary. But Hadjar has been the one carrying this team in qualifying on a consistent basis. And Lawson, I think Lawson is a lot better on a race day, I'll be honest, than qualifying. So I think for Lawson, I think as long as he gets in the top 12, 13 cars, I think he'll be satisfied with that, and then maybe can turn that into a points finish tomorrow. As the grandstands are full, as expected, here at the US Grand Prix. Some big news, by the way, coming out of America regarding Formula One. These last few races of 2025 are the last few races that ESPN will be broadcasting Formula One on their channels. From next year on, Formula One in America will be on Apple Plus, I think it is, which is a streaming service, which is the beginning of what we all know is going to happen. It's already happening in football and lots of, boxing and just lots of entertainment stuff. We're now moving towards streaming services for broadcasting sports. That's the way it's going. You can't stop it. And to be honest, it should go that way because streaming services are better than television. I think everyone, or not everyone, but I think most people would agree with that. And eventually, I think for us in Europe and the UK, I think eventually Formula One is going to be probably on Netflix or something like that. Sky F1's, I think, current broadcasting deal is up in, I think, 5 or 6 years' time. So, be interesting to see what happens then. By then, streaming platforms are going to have an even bigger foot in the sports broadcasting rights uh sector. So yeah, interesting times regarding the broadcasting rights of Formula One. So yeah, for you guys in America, if you want to watch Formula One next year, it'll be on Apple Plus, I believe it's called, rather than ESPN, which just simulcasts with Sky, I think anyway. So as looks like we're about to get back underway. Thankfully, not too long of a red flag that was. And it looks like we've got a few cars that are ready to get out into the pit lane and queue up. As out comes Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, not quite ready yet. And yeah, we've got almost every car immediately piling into the pit lane. As the session will restart in about 3.5 minutes from now. And like I said, hopefully that is the final red flag. Don't tend to really get red flags in qualifying for this Grand Prix. You get a lot of yellow flags, drivers going wide, and that happens quite a bit. But red flags doesn't tend to happen that much at all. As there is on the broadcast, Max Verstappen with his visor open, looking ahead to what could be only his second pole position in Austin in his career. As looking into the crowd there, mostly it's a sea of, by the looks of it, McLaren and Ferrari fans, which is not really a surprise because in terms of history and legacy, those are the two biggest teams in Formula One. Doesn't seem to be that many Haas fans, which is not a surprise. Haas have still, I still don't think Haas have even had a Formula One podium in their history. So the Americans are not going to really take to you if you're not a successful outfit in that way. But yeah, another, what, 90 seconds? And then we will be underway once again. And remember, about, was it 14 minutes and 51 seconds left on the clock, so not really going to make a difference for these teams in regards to their run plans. And they should be able to easily get in the lap times that they are going to do in this Q1 session. As a whole massive gaggle of cars waits in the pit lane. And the last car in the queue is Lando Norris, who took pole position at this Grand Prix last year. A very good pole position, one of the best he had last year. But then he completely blew it by having an absolute shocker of a start. One of the worst starts I've seen from a pole position person here at this track, I think, ever. It was horrendous. And it's what cost him not only fighting for the win, but even just getting on the podium, because he went from first straight down to fourth. As there you go. We have cars on track. And we are back underway here in qualifying. First car on track is Nico Hulkenberg. As we're looking at Yuki Tsunoda there on board in the pit lane, who's still just sat there waiting as all the cars slowly come out. Which, the teams are taking the piss a bit with how slowly they're coming out of the pit lane, but that's the way they do things. As there you go, 14 minutes remain in Q1. In this session, you'd imagine both Haas's and probably at least one Alpine will be eliminated. Obviously, Hadjar we know is out. So only 4 other cars will join him in Q1 and being eliminated. We'll see who those 4 are. And Lewis Hamilton still in the garage, and so is Oscar Piastri, who I think there are still some minor repairs going on from what happened earlier in the sprint, but he should still be fine. And again, remember what I said earlier, the lap time, the best lap time here in Q1 should be a mid 142. The slowest lap time, I think, to get through to Q2 probably will have to be a 140. No, not 140, a 130. What do you call it? Yeah, a 132.2 or a 130. No, 133.2 or a 133.3 is probably about the slowest you can go, I reckon, and manage to still get through. As Hulkenberg missed a bit of an apex through turn 8, but he's or turn 7, I think it was actually, but he's got through well. Then he's absolutely avoided the apex of turn 11. He's now onto the back straight, powering himself down to turn 12, which is the main overtaking opportunity. One thing I do like for this year is they've added a lot more, or they've added a bit more curbing and grippier curbing to that exit of that corner, so that you'll be able to fight more on the exit. As here comes Hulkenberg through the final couple corners. And let's see what Hulkenberg's first lap time is going to be. It's not going to be quick whatsoever. No, it's a 134.3, which is pretty slow, actually, for a first run in Q1. I was expecting something at least half a second better than that. As Bortoletto goes 0.4 of a second slower than that. So, yeah, not a great start there for Sauber. But it is only the first run, so they can still improve. As Carlos Sainz was doing a decent lap, and he's now come into the pit lane. He's been immediately called to the weighbridge, so not great timing there for Sainz. As Hadjar is now back in at the garage. Obviously, he's out of the session. Behrman goes second. As here comes Max Verstappen. Starts his first qualifying run. As Ocon goes third. And very strong start from Max in the first sector, 25.1. As Liam Lawson is a 134.2. Still not great lap times, though, I have to say, to start with from those midfield teams. But Max, we know, is so good at banging in a really strong time straight away in qualifying. Alonso is now quickest on a 33.7. That's a bit more like it. As Verstappen braking hard for turn 12. We didn't quite get into the apex, but still okay enough. So George Russell, interestingly, has gone second to Alonso. And then it's Lawson third, Hulkenberg fourth, and then Behrman, Ocon, and then Stroll. As Max Verstappen does a 133.5, which is decent at best, but definitely could be better from Max, no doubt about it. As Charles Leclerc comes to the line and goes quickest, thus proving that that lap from Max was not that great. So Leclerc currently quickest. Max Verstappen He's now second, and then it's Alonso, Russell, Antonelli, and then Pierre Gasly. Done a decent first run. He's up to 6th. And then it's, Gasly, Lawson, and then Sonoda, Hulkenberg, Behrman, Ocon, Stroll, Colapinto, and Bortoletto. So only, about 5 more cars to set a lap time. Lewis Hamilton has gone 3rd. Here comes Oscar Piastri, who goes 5th on a 1:33.8. Not a good start from Piastri there. As Lando Norris starts his first run, but goes incredibly wide at the first corner and loses probably a third of a second right there. But he's going to keep pushing anyway. And big step of oversteer on the exit of turn. Was it turn 10 or turn 9? That was a big snap, and he nearly went into the gravel, but he got away with it. But yeah, handling on that McLaren on that lap was not good. Again, he completely missed the apex of turn 1. Didn't even get anywhere near it. So that is not a good start from Norris. And yeah, Oscar Piastri's lap time wasn't that much better. And here we go. Up to turn 10. And through the middle of the corner it looked fine, but on the exit, when he applied the power, the rear end just really violently snapped round. Did well to hang on to it and keep it away from the gravel. Did Lando. So they'll have to cool down this lap and try again. As Carlos Sainz does a good first run, 1:33.7. And goes up to 4th place. Sainz is a different man after that podium in Baku. That's clear to see. As Lando Norris starts another attempt at a lap. Into turn 1. A lot better on the front end this time. And now into the S's. Absolutely brilliant part of the track. And a decent first sector. Nothing special, though. Not as good as Max's first sector from earlier, which was a 25.1. That was like a 25.3 or 25.4, I think, from Norris. But one thing that is clear is that since the summer break, McLaren are definitely nowhere near as quick as they were. And that's because the others have brought another additional upgrade and have closed that gap, especially Red Bull. And that's what's made these last couple races a lot more interesting than they probably would have been if they happened before the summer break. Because McLaren do not quite have the advantage that they had previously. As Lando does a purple middle sector. Remember, he was quickest in the middle sector in sprint qualifying, but just didn't have enough pace in the first and final sector to be the outright quickest. Now through the final corner. What is the lap time? He goes slower than his teammate by a couple hundreds of seconds. Yeah, not a good start from the two McLarens. 6th and 7th only. Yes, it's only the first running of qualifying, but expecting quite a bit more from the McLarens than that. As we're now looking at George Russell on a new lap. 3.5 minutes to go in Q1. Russell currently in 8th. As long as Russell improves his lap time by, say, half a second compared to what he did previously, then he should be good enough to get through then to Q2. That's all really it's about. Q1 is just getting yourself to the next part of the session. Doesn't matter how quick you are in this part of the session. If you're a front-running team, again, that's all that matters. It's just getting yourself through and just making sure you keep confidence in the car. As Russell's had a good lap. Car looks pretty good there through the final corner. And, yep, he does go half a second quicker and goes quickest. 133.3. And that should be him through to Q2. Here's Yuki Tsunoda. Was 18th in sprint qualifying. What can he do today? Car looked actually pretty decent in that final corner, but he goes 9th, but I would not be confident whatsoever with that lap time. Antonelli, though, does a 133.5 and goes 2nd. I'm expecting, though, a big improvement in lap time from pretty much all the drivers, because I don't think what we've seen so far is really that representative how quick they can go in this part of qualifying. As Max Verstappen we're looking at now on a new lap. He's improved his middle sector. And Max probably going to go at least 3rd with this lap, maybe 2nd, and definitely confirm himself into Q2. As Max through the final couple corners. And Verstappen, brilliant final sector. He goes quickest by a 1/10 of a second, and 133.2, sorry. So yeah, he is definitely through. Lap times in this session about half a second slower than I was expecting, so I would revise, let's just say that, my lap time projection. To get through to Q2, I think you're going to have to do at least a 133 something. As Hulkenberg goes 5th. Where does Bortoleto go? 14th. On a 134.1. That is not good enough. Bortoleto's in trouble with that lap time. As proven by Lance Stroll, who immediately goes 11th from 17th. Esteban Ocon goes 16th. He is out. Esteban Ocon out in Q1. Not a surprise. The Haas is not very quick. Behrman, though, currently in the top 15. Can he remain there? It's going to be close. Liam Lawson up to 5th. That's him through to Q2. As Alex Albon's just in a purple first sector. Pierre Gasly up to 7th. That's Gasly through to Q2. Can his teammate Colapinto join him? He goes 15th, but I don't think he will be joining his teammate as Bortoleto drops into the drop zone. Bortoleto is out. As Lance Stroll, by the way, has had his lap time deleted. So Stroll is back down to 18th. So Stroll is out as well. So we're just looking now at Alex Albon in 19th. Can he drag himself out of the drop zone and get into Q2? Surely he can. The car is easily quick enough. As the checkered flag has fallen, this is the final lap. And Albon through the final corner. Surely he's done enough. And he has. He goes 8th on a 133.6. Easily good enough. And Albon is into Q2. Which pushes Franco Colapinto into the drop zone. So there you go. That is Q1 over and done with. Let's go through the drivers that have made it through to Q2. Verstappen, Russell, Antonelli, Leclerc, Lawson, Hulkenberg, Gasly, Albon, Hamilton, Sainz, Alonso, Piastri, Norris, Behrman, and Tsunoda. And knocked out in Q1, Franco Colapinto, Gabriel Bortoleto, Esteban Ocon, Lance Stroll, and Isaac Hadjar. And Q2 will be underway in about 2 or 3 minutes' time. And looking back at that session, Colapinto being eliminated, not a surprise. Ocon, not a surprise. Stroll, not a surprise. Hadjar, we've already talked about that. Poor mistake from him. And oh no, Alex Albon has had his lap time deleted. So Albon is out in 19th place. Track limit violation at turn 15. What a disaster, given how quick Williams look. Albon is out. So it's Bortoleto, Ocon, Stroll, Albon, and Hadjar. And here's the track limit violation. Yeah, quite clearly at turn 15. Got some oversteer, put the power down, and went over the track limits. That's a poor mistake from Albon. And Albon asking his engineer to check because he feels like his front tyres were on the line, but they were not. He clearly went over. But Colapinto is through. Both Alpines into Q2. That is the first time that's happened in quite a while. Both Alpines getting into Q2. But Bortoleto, really disappointing. This is probably the first poor weekend Bortoleto's had. Probably in his whole debut season, given how quick the Sauber is this weekend. Ocon, I don't think you can really blame him too much. The Haas is just not that quick. Stroll, as expected, doing what Lance Stroll does. And yeah, very poor from Albon and Hadjar having his crash. But yeah, Q2 will be underway in another couple of minutes. I am just going to quickly mute myself, guys, because I need to quickly go and get a tissue for my nose. So I'll be probably 30 seconds or so. So just give me, 30 seconds or maybe slightly longer. So I can just quickly get a tissue for my nose and then I'll be back with you guys for Q2 in a moment. Not sure if that was quicker than 30 seconds or not, but it felt a bit quicker than I was expecting to be. But hopefully that'll be a bit better, that tissue for now. But yeah, that's Q1 done with. And already at least one big surprise. One of the Williamses being eliminated, given that Williams have been consistently in the top 10 all weekend. But now, it's all about Q2, where we will knock out the next 5 slowest cars. This, though, is going to be a bit more of a formality. Because both Alpines, you would expect, will be eliminated, and Behrman as well. So, what we're really focusing on is 11th and 12th place. Will we see, potentially, a Mercedes like yesterday in sprint qualifying with Antonelli getting eliminated? Or will even Ferrari lose a car in Q2? we'll find out. Obviously, we've got Yuki Tsunoda in there. Tsunoda has been eliminated before Q3 multiple times, so it's likely that will maybe happen again. We'll see. But this is going to be interesting. We could definitely get a surprise. As Q2 is going to start in about 25 seconds time. And yeah, this should be definitely a better session, especially for the front runners, to really understand where they're at going into the rest of qualifying. Max looked very good. Mercedes, I've got to say, looked a bit better than I was expecting in that session, but maybe that's because the others were sandbagging a bit more. McLaren didn't really show us anything in that session. They were pretty slow and they only did one run. So yeah, we'll see what happens in Q2. As Lando saying on the radio, I'm going to need a new steering wheel for the next run. The whole left grip of his steering wheel has come off. I think he means the rubber grip that they have, or where the hands go when they control the car, change gear, and all of that. But yeah, Q2 is underway. We're about 45 seconds in, and the first car on track is George Russell, who was second in Q1. See if we can keep up a decent speed in this session. In this session, though, I'm expecting the lap times at the top of the timesheets to be around a mid 1:32, say a 1:32.5, 1:32.6. To get through to Q3, you're going to have to do probably a 1:33.5 at the absolute slowest, maybe a 1:33.4. But if you do a low 1 minute 33 or better, you should be good enough to get through to Q3. So keep an eye on the lap times in regards to what certain teams do. As we're looking on the broadcast at Antonelli. As now we look at Lewis Hamilton, who's still in the garage, waiting to be released. Lewis Hamilton, of course, one of the most successful drivers in the history of this Grand Prix. He won the first ever US Grand Prix here in Austin. And he also won here in 2014, 15, 16, 17. And I think that was it for his race wins. But he had some great moments here, not only with the race wins, but remember he won his third and sixth World Championship at this circuit. So lots of good memories for Hamilton. And yeah, that race where he won his third World Championship, that was 10 years ago. Just to make us feel incredibly old and ancient, 10 years ago was that race where he won the third world title, where Rosberg crumbled because of a gust of wind and Hamilton flew through, no pun intended, to take the win that won him the championship. Where has the time gone? As Antonelli is flying around on his first Q2 run. The Mercedes looks pretty decent around the circuit, but whether the lap time is there, not sure compared to the others. And Antonelli, I think, might have just exceeded track limits there at turn 19. Not sure, though. We'll have to see what the FIA say. But he does a 1:33.0 to start. That is a good first run from Antonelli if he gets to keep that lap time. As Behrman, I think, has done the second lap time as Russell fighting the car through the final corner and only goes third, 4/10 slower than his teammate. Russell definitely has a lot more potential in that car. That, by the way, good lap time from Behrman, 1:33.2. That's a very good lap time from Behrman in that car. And Lawson goes third, also very good lap time from him. So strong start from those two. The midfield this weekend, very competitive. As Carlos Sainz through the final corner. What does he do? He nearly goes quickest. He does a 1:33.1. Also a brilliant lap time from the Spaniard as Gasly goes sixth. Gasly, quite a slow lap time from him. Lando Norris is on a lap that will probably take him to the top of the timesheets as Alonso goes third. Good start from him as well. Some very strong lap times being put in by the midfield runners, I must say. Hulkenberg up to fifth. Here comes Lando Norris, as Gasly has had his lap time deleted, by the way. And Norris goes quickest by a 10th and a half, a 1:32.8. That is a very good lap time. But is it about to be beaten by Max Verstappen? Oh, yes, it is. A 1:32.701. Max, once again, proving to be just too quick. So, Max first, Norris second, and then Antonelli, Sainz, Alonso, Behrman, Hulkenberg, Lawson, Russell, and Tsunoda. Here comes Oscar Piastri, World Championship leader. Slight bit of understeer through the final corner. Comes to the line. Only fifth. Half a second off the pace. Piastri has not been at it this weekend, but still has time to find the lap time. It's only Q2, remember. As here comes Charles Leclerc. That's a very good lap time. Second for Leclerc. Only a 10th and a half behind Verstappen. Very impressive pace there from Ferrari. And here comes Lewis Hamilton, who goes fourth, only slightly slower than his teammate. Have Ferrari just surprised us and arrived to the party? Because that is some very good lap times they've just set, as that is a replay of Colapinto nearly shitting himself, figuratively, through the S's section, as that's a replay of Gasly having a massive bout of oversteer at the final corner, which caused him to have the track limit violation. As Tsunoda claiming that Lawson is disturbing him on purpose in certain corners. I don't really think so, to be honest. Remember, those two are pretty much best friends. But yeah, very interesting Q2 so far. And currently, with 7 minutes to go in Q2, the drop zone is Lawson, Russell, Tsunoda, Colapinto, and Gasly. But interesting, Ferrari suddenly have shown quite the turn of pace. Are they in the conversation for a top position or a front row? We'll find out more as this session goes on. Also, keep your eye on George Russell, because that lap time he did was obviously nowhere near his best. I think once he does his best lap time, I think he'll be right in there as well. So looking a lot closer at the front in terms of the fight for the top 3 or 4 positions than I was expecting it to be. As Caravan City, Motorhome City, in the car parks there at the Circuit of the Americas track. as Ferrari look like they are just in the final stages of preparation before they send their two drivers out one final time. And I'm an idiot. I'm an absolute fucking idiot. I completely forgot to put the timer on the screen. Normally I'm good at doing that. But for some reason, I just totally forgot. Sorry about that. If you're wondering, there is 5 minutes and 10 seconds to go in Q2. I will get the timer on screen in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There you go. So yeah, sorry about that. Don't know why I didn't do it. Again, normally I'm doing that all the time, but for some reason just had a complete brain fade. I have had a long day, so there's that. As the two Alpines come out, Oliver Behrman has been released from his garage as well. Behrman, I've got to say, is doing an amazing job in the top 10 in a car that's been pretty much one of the slowest all weekend. If he gets into Q3, that is one of the performances of the day, without a doubt. As Russell drifting a bit on the exit of turn 1. George Russell has never finished on the podium here in Texas. And that first sector was good, but whether it's going to lead to a good lap, we don't know quite yet. As Russell now powering down the back straight. And let's see what the middle sector looks like. Not great. He's only just under a tenth up on Hulkenberg on this lap. So yeah, this is not a great lap from Russell. He might get himself into Q3, but he's not going to be in a very high position at all. Let's see what he does for the final sector, whether he can drag enough lap time out to get himself through. Usually so great in qualifying, but this is looking a bit shaky. To the line, go 6th, 1:33.0. That should be good enough. But yeah, he's not going to comfortably get through. But again, should just about be enough. But surely he could improve quite a bit on that performance level in Q3, because it's still slower than Antonelli. And Antonelli hasn't even done his next lap yet. As we're looking at Yuki Tsunoda, currently 13th. Can Tsunoda get himself through? Car looks pretty good through the first sector. No snaps. Car hitting the apex. Brakes hard for turn 11. Not sure how well the car went in. Didn't look great, but might have just been good enough. As Tsunoda powers down to turn 12. And not sure this lap's going to be enough for Tsunoda. Not improved his middle sector. He's going to have to really send it in this final sector if he's going to get through. Into the final couple corners. And I think he might have just exceeded the track limits there. So yeah, I think Tsunoda is not going to get through. To the line. No, stays 13th. Poor effort, I'm afraid. Antonelli, by the way, has done a purple middle sector. Here comes Hulkenberg. Can he get through to Q3? No, he can't. There goes my prediction. Both Saubers don't even make Q3. Antonelli stays 5th. Antonelli should be fine, though. That lap time he's done should get him through. Just about. As the only cars to look out for now is Lawson and the Racing Bulls and the 2 Alpines. Alpine, though, I'd be amazed if one of them even got close to getting into Q3. As we're on board with Colapinto. And yeah, Colapinto is absolutely nowhere near Behrman on lap time. So Colapinto is probably going to end up 15th with this lap time once his teammate completes his lap. Gasly, actually, he's quite close to Behrman on lap time. After the first 2 sectors, Gasly, if he absolutely sends it in the final sector, he might have a chance of doing what would be a miracle, quite frankly. Here comes Colapinto, who stays in 14th. But his teammate Pierre Gasly, what can he do? Currently in 15th. Goes up to 14th. And yeah, he lost nearly half a second to Behrman in the final sector. That Alpine is awful in the final sector of the lap. But 14th and 15th, really, let's be honest, that's the best they could have done in this session, as Lewis Hamilton completely misses the apex of turn 12. Not a lot of apexes are being kissed on this beautifully hot day in Texas. As Liam Lawson, as Hamilton now backs off, which, yeah, he should, because he's fine. And yeah, Lawson had a lap time deleted for track limit, so that's it. Lawson is also out. So guys, that's Q2. Over and done with. Very anticlimactic. As here's a replay of Oliver Behrman in the first sector. Let's just watch this replay. Does he have a big moment? Oh, yeah, big snap of oversteer through turn 5. That could have been really bad, but he held on to it. And what a job Behrman has done. He has made it into Q3 in one of the slowest cars on the grid this weekend. That is a top performance from Behrman, who really is shining in this second half of the season. Anyway, these are the drivers that are on their way to the top 10 shootout. Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, Lewis Hamilton, Kimi Antonelli, George Russell, Carlos Sainz, Oscar Piastri, Fernando Alonso, and Oliver Behrman. Knocked out in Q2, Nico Hülkenberg, Liam Lawson, Yuki Tsunoda, Pierre Gasly, and Franco Colapinto. And Q3 will be underway in about 3 or 4 minutes from now. Obviously, it'll be a 12-minute long session. I will make sure this time to sync up the timer at the 11-minute mark. Make sure to keep voting that poll, by the way. That poll is still running and will keep running for another couple of minutes or so. To be honest, though, I think I'm probably going to end the poll now because it is pretty clear who the winner of this poll is. So let me just finish the results and go through them. So I asked you guys who will take pole position for the United States Grand Prix. 288 votes. Thank you guys for voting. And 72% of the vote has gone to Max Verstappen. 15% for Norris, 8% for Piastri, 5% for Russell. Yeah. And, well, I agree. I think Max Verstappen will get pole. Even though Ferrari have kind of thrown themselves in there and Mercedes look kind of closer as well, I think Max gets the job done. He is just too good when it matters most. In terms of who got knocked out, Hülkenberg, poor effort, especially given what he did earlier this weekend, what we know he can do. Lawson, I think Lawson will be pretty satisfied with that, 12th on the grid. I don't think he could have done any better than that. And we know Lawson is a better racer than qualifiers, so he probably has a decent chance of finishing the points tomorrow. Tsunoda 13th, poor, really poor. And then the two Alpines, 14th and 15th, again. The Alpines, they can't do anything better than that. That was the best they could do. But yeah, in terms of the fight for pole, Max is the favourite. Again, very interesting that Ferrari and Mercedes appear to be a lot closer in compared to Red Bull and McLaren than we expected. Lando is still right in there. One thing that is interesting though is Oscar Piastri through qualifying has been pretty slow. Not compared necessarily to Norris, because he was quicker than Norris in Q1, but compared to, say, Max, yeah, Piastri has been quite a bit off the pace. So I am interested with Oscar Piastri to see where he is, at least on this first run in Q3, because he's not looked at it at all so far. As 2 minutes to go, if you're wondering, until the start of Q3. Already a car lined up at the exit of the pit lane. Oliver Behrman for the home team Haas. Again, what a job he's done. And that is another great performance from Behrman. He really has been one of the star performers of the midfield in these last few races. And if he keeps this up for the rest of this year and even going through next season, there is a pretty decent chance it will result in a drive for the Scuderia, because there are pretty persistent rumours that Charles Leclerc could be racing for Ferrari only one more season after this one. So Behrman just needs to keep these performances up, and he's putting himself in the frame possibly for a Ferrari drive in a couple years' time, which is, let's be honest, his dream. As all the cars queue up at the exit of the pit lane, as just under a minute now to go until the shootout in Texas. We've all watched plenty of shootouts in Texas, not just in Formula One, but in Hollywood. Will this one be as good as some of those classics? We will find out in these next 12 minutes. We've had some great fights for pole here in the past, and hopefully this one lives up to that. There's a man on the TV broadcast that took many poles, Lewis Hamilton. And there's Max Verstappen still in the garage. Can he take his first pole here in Texas in 4 years? The pole he took here 4 years ago was crucial in him winning that championship. It could be crucial in him winning his 5th championship this year. As the session has begun, and the first two cars on track are Behrman and then Piastri. Even though Piastri's not been at it, remember Piastri has a better qualifying head-to-head than Lando Norris. As Verstappen still in the garage, interestingly, it's a Red Bull going for a slightly different plan compared to everybody else, which will allow him to have a bit more grip than others. Might make the difference in the end. And there you go. 11 minutes remain in qualifying. Who will take pole for the United States Grand Prix? A few of the drivers who have made Q3 have started on pole here before. Verstappen, Leclerc, Norris, Hamilton, even Carlos Sainz, remember, even though Sainz's pole position lasted a few hundred meters until he was punted out by George Russell. So plenty of experience out there when it comes to taking pole at this track. And we've had 6 different pole sitters in the last 6 US Grand Prix here in Texas. Those drivers being Norris, Leclerc, Sainz, Verstappen, Bottas, and Hamilton. Just shows you how competitive it is here. This is not a track, qualifying-wise, you can dominate. As here comes the World Championship leader. Doesn't necessarily need pole with this next 10 minutes of qualifying, but needs to at least be ahead of his teammate going into tomorrow's crucial race. What's his first pole position attempt looking like? Now into the S's. This is where the McLaren theoretically should be at its absolute strongest. Not a great first sector time from Piastri. Definitely not as good as George Russell, who goes 0.2 of a second quicker than him. Brilliant start from Russell. Is Russell going to deliver another Saturday special? As Piastri brakes hard for turn 12. And yeah, this is not a pole position worthy lap whatsoever. Pole position, by the way, the lap times should be a low 1:32. So if anyone could do a low 1:32, then they're going to be right in that fight for pole, as Oliver Bearman sets the first lap time of Q3. What does Piastri's first lap time look like? A 1:33.4. That is an absolute stinker of a lap. That is horrible. Russell, 32.9. Goes quickest, but I feel there's a lot more lap time out there than that. Lando Norris has done a purple first sector. Antonelli goes second on 33.1. That is same lap time Antonelli did in Q2. So Mercedes not really going that much quicker so far. Max Verstappen does a purple first sector. We're looking at Carlos Sainz. Through the final corner, can he go ahead of Bearman and Piastri? No, he does not. He splits them. So in fourth, Bearman currently third, only just behind Antonelli. What a start from Bearman. As Lando Norris through the final couple corners. As Ferrari I've got Lewis Hamilton up in sixth. Lando Norris goes to the top by 0.5 but I don't think that's going to last very long. As here comes Max Verstappen. He's done a purple first sector, purple middle sector. I know this is only the first attempt at pole, but he's going to set a decent benchmark here. Through the final corner, what's the lap time looking like? It's a 1:32.5, 0.4 quicker than Norris. Have that, he says to the rest of the field. And I still think he can go probably another 0.3 of a second quicker than that. That is brilliant. And that right there is why Verstappen is the best. Nearly 0.5 second clear of the next rival Absolutely brilliant. Ferrari, by the way, 9th and 10th. Ferrari, I'm not quite sure we're on fresh tyres for that final or for that first Q3 run. Oliver Behrman currently in 5th. That would be easily driver of the day performance if he ends up 5th. As that's why Lewis Hamilton has such a poor lap. Locked up at turn 1, went wide and cost himself 3 or 4 tenths of a second. The Hamilton's got a lot more pace in that Ferrari, even if it's on used tyres. And then that's Leclerc having his lap time deleted. Oh no, he had a spin. He did a complete 360 at the final corner. And I think he probably, the inside curb of the final corner unsettled the car, went to apply some throttle and it spun him round. As Max saying the track is a bit more difficult, I think. The lap times are quite a bit slower from a lot of them than I was expecting. I was expecting a lot of the front drivers to be in the 132s when we've only got 2 of them in the 132s. Norris is only barely in the 132s. Max obviously comfortably in the 132s. But yeah, 4 minutes left in qualifying. Can anyone get near Max Verstappen? Never mind, stop him from getting pole. We'll find out. Oscar Piastri, though, this is a vital final lap coming up. He's currently in 7th place. He has to make sure he's at least 3rd. He cannot afford to be that far down. If he is throwing this championship away. As most of the cars now coming back out onto the circuit. And we're going to find out just how this grid will shake up. Ferrari surely can do better than 9th and 10th. Mercedes looking pretty decent. I think they'd be very happy if they end up 3rd and 4th on the grid. Remember, Ferrari finished 1st and 2nd from those grid positions last year. But if the grid ends up the way it is now, Max will be smiling from ear to ear because Oscar Piastri, the championship leader, in 7th. And if he did end up 7th, I think Piastri would be probably unlikely to finish on the podium, which would give Max even more points advantage in his hunt, his quest for a 5th world championship. As the 2 Ferraris on the back straight, Leclerc just coming through turn 12, Hamilton now halfway down the back straight. Remember, the only driver in Formula One history to win 5 championships in a row is Michael Schumacher. Max Verstappen looking to do that this year. It looks so unlikely just a couple months ago, but with every session that comes and goes, you start to think, actually, could this guy actually pull it off? Still, though, this final lap, much can change. And let's see what Charles Leclerc can do on this final lap. He's had pole here before. Can he drag this car into a decent position? Car a bit skittish on the exit of turn 1. Now into the S's. That car looks like it's on the edge of literally snapping and crashing violently, but he's somehow kept it together. And done a pretty good first sector as well, only a 10th down on Max. That's Max being told on the radio, we need to go currently behind schedule. As in, he needs to speed up on this outlap if he wants to make the start-finish line. And actually, he's not that far ahead of Leclerc, who's on his final lap. So Leclerc might get a bit held up here. Max lets him through, though. This is a good lap from Leclerc. This might put him in the top 3 on the grid for now. As Lewis Hamilton on a pretty good lap also. As here comes Leclerc to the line. What is it? It's second. But again, others are yet to improve their final run. As Verstappen failed to get to the line in time. So Max is done. Will he hold on to pole? As Lewis Hamilton goes fourth. So second and fourth at the moment for Ferrari, but again, everyone else except for Verstappen yet to finish their laps. Carlos Sainz currently on a lap. Carlos very much in form. What can he pull out of the bag? He's currently in 8th. As Russell goes 3rd. Carlos Sainz to the line. Stays in 8th. As Oscar Piastri has not done a good middle sector. And this is a difficult lap for Piastri. Can he somehow drag this car into at least the top 5? As Lando Norris puts it just about by 0.06 of a second on the front row. Here comes the championship leader. He's currently 9th. Can he get higher than that? Surely he can. It's only 6th. A disaster for the championship leader. 6th only. Here comes Antonelli. What can he do? He stays in 7th. Bit disappointing that, but it's okay from him in the end. But Max Verstappen, we knew with that lap, was going to be too good to beat. And he takes his 2nd pole at the Circuit of the Americas and is very much the favourite to win the US Grand Prix. Brilliant day for Max. Wins the sprint, takes pole. He is absolutely dominating this weekend. And Piastri only 6th. If Piastri doesn't finish on the podium tomorrow, Max wins. Max very much could be looking at a 5th World Championship. Norris in 2nd. Lando, you have to say, did the best he could. Max was just too good today. Leclerc 3rd. What a drive from Leclerc. How on earth has he dragged that car into the top 3? Whoever predicted Hamilton or Leclerc to get in the top 3 earlier and said, am I delusional? You were not delusional. You were right. I am the delusional one. What an effort from Leclerc. Once again proving why we rate him so highly. Russell 4th. Good drive from Russell. Hamilton 5th. Also good performance from him. 3rd and 5th. What a recovery that is for Ferrari. Piastri 6th. Disaster for Piastri. And that could very much cost him dearly when it is all said and done in Abu Dhabi. Antonelli 7th. Behrman 8th. 8th on the grid in one of the slowest cars. What a performance from Behrman. Sainz in 9th. And Alonso 10th. What a race we have got on our hands tomorrow, and a very important one for the championship. And the rest of the field, Hulkenberg 11th, Lawson 12th, Tsunoda 13th, Gasly 14th, Colapinto 15th, and then Bortoletto, Ocon, Stroll, Albon, and Hadjar. But there you go. That's qualifying for the US Grand Prix. And let me quickly start up a poll asking you guys, who is your driver of the day for qualifying in Texas? And the options are, I think, pretty clear. Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc's got to be an option. I'm going to put Lewis Hamilton in there. I thought he had a good day. And Oliver Behrman. For me, driver of the day is between Max and Behrman. Honestly, I'm not sure who I'd go for because Max was really just unbelievably great in that session. But Behrman, what a job he has done. 4th row grid position in a car that has looked so horrendous this weekend. Looney Classic says, I still think Lando will win it all. We'll see. What happened to Oscar? He was poor. I don't know if his car is damaged from the collision in the sprint, but he was not at it at all in qualifying. He was poor the whole way through. That's one of the worst qualifying sessions he's had in a long time. And again, this is the worst time to be having this form. He's got to be finishing at least on the podium at this point to make sure he can get the job done, but he just isn't. But again, tomorrow there is a race. There is plenty that could happen tomorrow. I'm pretty sure Max Verstappen won this race from 6th on the grid a couple years ago, so you never know what could happen. But yeah, Piastri, if he doesn't finish on the podium tomorrow and Max wins, then my God, that is a big swing in the championship in Max's favour. Looney Classic saying, let's be honest, Chaz, that Oscar's been very disappointing since the break. I wouldn't say very disappointing, but I've been disappointed, yeah. But I wouldn't say it's been like really disappointing. Remember, he did win in Zandvoort. That was a really great drive. Monza. I was a bit disappointed there because of what he did the year before. I thought he could have been a lot better, but still a decent result. Baku was absolutely terrible. And then Singapore, I thought he did decently in qualifying, but then with what happened with Lando at the start, ever since then, the momentum has just been completely took away from him. So he's got to find a way to swing it back in his favour. And he's got to do it quick because we've not got many races to go. Crystal saying Laurent McKee's doing a top job. Has done so far. Be interested to see, though, how he does next year, because I think next year is going to be a tricky season with the whole Ford powertrain stuff. And personally, I'm not expecting Red Bull to be winning races, really, next year. But who knows? We have no idea what's going to happen next season. It's all just pie in the sky thinking. Yeah, Crystal saying from 105 points behind pre-Monza to just 55 behind for Max. And yeah, if tomorrow's race finishes the way the current grid is, Max will be only 38 points behind. In the space of what, 6 weeks, 7 weeks? That is incredible. The turnaround. But again, maybe Max won't win tomorrow. We all thought he was going to win this Grand Prix last year and he didn't. You just don't know. We've seen some great races and some crazy things happen here at this Grand Prix. So make sure to tune in tomorrow. Remember, I will be live for the race watch-along tomorrow at 6 p.m. UK time, 2 hours before the race starts at 8 p.m. here in the UK. And obviously, I'll do a build-up to the race, and then we'll watch along the race, and we'll see, ultimately, what goes down in Austin. And this race, this could be the race, from Max's point of view, this could be the race that really swings it in his favour. But it could be the race that ends his hopes. Again, you just don't know. Maybe, Max gets took out at the first corner. You just don't know. That's the great thing about Formula One. You have to wait and see. And we'll find out tomorrow. Cannot wait for this Grand Prix. Cheers, Todd, by the way, who says later. Paul James Scribb says Supermax still 55 points behind Oscar, only 5 races left. Well, 6. Remember, we've got this Grand Prix as well. Plus the next 5. And he says could be an interesting last race again. Could be. We'll have to see though. We're still in a position where we don't know when the championship is going to be decided. As in, we still don't know yet whether it actually will go to the final race. I think it will, but it's not at all guaranteed. We still need to see really what happens at this Grand Prix and next Grand Prix in Mexico to really know for sure whether we will be going down to that final race in Abu Dhabi. Looney Classics, what do you think of Aston Martin next year? They have Honda Power and Newey. A lot of potential. I really have my fingers crossed for Alonso's sake, but I think it all comes down to the Honda Power Unit. If it's good enough, then I trust Adrian Newey to work his magic. So we'll see. I think they could be the joker in the pack, Aston Martin, because they've got a lot of potential, but we don't really know where or what their ceiling is, if you know what I mean. Because all we've heard in regards to next season is that Mercedes have looked like they've got the jump on everyone with the power units, which obviously is going to benefit Mercedes, McLaren, Williams, Alpine. So when it comes to the others, Aston Martin, Ferrari, Red Bull, Audi. Remember, you got them as well, who God knows what they're going to be like. That's what is so exciting for me about next season, is there are so many what ifs. And that's the great thing about a big reset in the regulations. Anyway, there is a clear winner for the Driver of the Day vote, even though there's only been just over 20 votes. Let me just finish up these results and read them out before I head off. If they'll appear in chat, that is. And no, so it hasn't been in the chat, annoyingly. As Astro earlier saying, glad Verstappen is so far behind. Good to see you, by the way, mate. I know you weren't with us earlier in the stream, but good to see you anyway. But on my end, there you go. Finally appears. And yeah, who is your driver there for qualifying, I asked? 22 votes, and 64% of the vote went to Max Verstappen. Not surprised about that. And then 14% for Hamilton and Behrman, and then 8% for Leclerc. Cheers for voting, guys, and cheers for coming along for this stream. Been great to be along with you guys for this qualifying session that has delivered quite a exciting grid for tomorrow's race. And again, make sure to join me tomorrow for the United States Grand Prix race watch along. I'll be live at 6 p.m. UK time, 2 hours before lights out, to build up to the race and then do the watch along, of course, itself. Remember, Niblo, my co-commentator as usual, will not unfortunately be able to join us. So it will be a solo watch along. So make sure to come along, contribute, and just hang out and all of that. And yeah, we'll see what happens in what is a massive, massive race in determining the destiny of the 2025 Drivers' Championship. Cannot wait to get into it. But yeah, cheers for you guys coming along tonight. And I hope to see you guys tomorrow. Make sure to smash the like button before you go. Obviously, hit the like button does help the channel and the algorithm and helps show me that you guys enjoy this content. Make sure to subscribe for more content like this if you are new. And guys, until tomorrow's race watch along for what could be a crucial deciding race in who wins this Drivers' Championship, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.